Let me tell you a secret about the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. Sure, he could float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, but when it came to women, well, that was a whole other fight. Ali used to say, women weaken legs, but he didn't mean they'd put him in a headlock or make him tap out. No, he meant they were a distraction. A sweet, dangerous distraction. But don't get it twisted. Ali wasn't just fighting in the ring. He was bobbing and weaving around temptations outside it too. And believe me, that was a tougher fight than Sonny Liston or George Foreman ever gave him. Imagine young Cassius Clay, the boy who would become Muhammad Ali. He had the speed, the smile, and the charm of a superstar. And women noticed. Actually, noticed is an understatement. They surrounded him like fans at a rock concert. And Ali? Well, he knew how to work a crowd, whether it was in a stadium or on the sidewalk. But Ali had a problem. He was a man of faith, a member of the Nation of Islam, and discipline was a big deal. He was taught that lust was a distraction, a weakness. In the ring, a single second of distraction could mean a knockout. And in life, he believed it could mean losing his focus, his strength, his soul. So what did he do? Well, first, he tried talking himself out of temptation, like a guy on a diet standing in front of a chocolate cake. He'd tell himself, women weaken legs, women weaken legs. But sometimes his legs didn't seem to get the message. Ali's trainers knew this too, which is why they had one iron rule for him. No women during training camp. None. Zero. Zilch. Not even a friendly hug. To them, a single kiss could turn the greatest fighter in the world into a tired punching bag. Now, you'd think Ali would have a hard time with this, but he was a master of discipline, at least most of the time. During training, he'd lock himself away, surrounded only by sweaty trainers, punching bags, and the occasional frozen steak. Romantic, right? But it wasn't always easy. Sometimes women would sneak to his training camp, hoping to catch a glimpse of the champ. And Ali, with his silver tongue, had to explain his situation like a monk turning down a cheeseburger. But here's the thing. Ali had a secret weapon against temptation. His sense of humor. He'd joke about it constantly, saying things like, I'm too pretty to fall for pretty women, they just mess up my face. When reporters asked him how he stayed focused, he'd flash that famous grin and say, I keep my eyes on the prize, and off the thighs. He'd even warn other fighters, if you want to be a champ, you gotta stay away from the chumps. That was his nickname for his biggest opponent, lust. But here's the twist. Ali wasn't perfect. In his younger years, he struggled with his own advice. He had multiple marriages, and his personal life was as dramatic as his fights. But as he grew older, he seemed to gain a better understanding of his own weaknesses. One of Ali's biggest weapons against temptation was his faith. He wasn't just a boxer, he was a man with a strong spiritual side. He'd pray, meditate, and reflect on his purpose. He believed that every punch he threw, every fight he won, was part of a divine plan. And when it came to women, he saw his struggle as a test. If I can dodge a Joe Frazier left hook, I can dodge temptation, he'd joke. But it wasn't all jokes. Behind the humor was a man genuinely trying to balance his love for life with his commitment to his beliefs. He would remind himself that every moment of weakness could be a moment of regret. And Ali hated regret. He used to hear handlers, trainers, and managers during his amateur days commenting on the poor showing of certain fighters with sad shakes of the head. Serves him right. I told him to stay away from that stuff. Listening to them, Ali prayerfully resolved to avoid sex at all costs. And up until the 1958 Golden Gloves, he was glowingly successful without even a struggle. What he wanted in life was to be a spectacular winning performer. And if turning his back on sex was what it took, Ali would be like a nun. Many doctors and researchers have come to entirely different conclusions on the matter of sex and the athlete. But when Ali first entered competitions, the younger fighters listened with rapt attention to the old pros who testified on the evils of sex. One or another would account for his defeat or near knockout by telling some hot, juicy tale of his fatal encounter with an unexpected piece, while the managers and trainers would nod in agreement. If they saw the younger fighters, their protégés, trying to make it with a girl, they'd take them aside and say, "Kid, you gotta make her think you're dead. Stay away, or it'll ruin you." Then they'd glide over to the girl, take over, and leave the younger fighters wondering why sex could be so bad for them and so good for the trainers. "You don't know how to handle it yet." Donnie Hall, Ali's best friend among the older boxers, would patiently explain. Ali had grown up in Louisville with Donnie, a tall, well-built black man with beautiful teeth and flashing eyes who defeated opponents with the same ease with which he acquired the prettiest girls. "How do you handle it?" Ali asked him one day when they were preparing for the Golden Gloves trials. Donnie had won Louisville's heavyweight division, and Ali had won in the light heavy. Donnie glanced around to see if anyone was listening. "When we get to Chicago, I'll show you." He winked. "Right now, play it cool. Don't fool around with women. Keep your strength." With that, Donnie, who was 4 years older than Ali, strolled off to join his latest girlfriend. Ali hardly needed the warning. He had just turned 16 and was miserably shy and bashful. It took all the courage he could muster to even approach a girl. If that was to be his only problem, Ali thought, he had the championship in the bag. It was a cold February in '58 when their team got to Chicago and huddled together in the St. Clair Hotel, a few blocks from icy Lake Michigan. There were 6 of them who wanted to go on to become pros: Ed Whitaker, Davey Hilton, Elmer Dennison, Bill Wickstrom, Donnie Hall, and Ali. To them, winning the Golden Gloves meant getting the master's degree they needed for professional work. Ali had already lost 1 shot the previous year when he was taken out in Louisville because the doctor found something irregular about his heartbeat. It cleared up, whatever it was, but too late for him to enter the tournament. And that year, most of all, Ali wanted to return home a champion. One time, while preparing for a fight, a beautiful woman tried to flirt with him. Ali smiled and said, "Girl, I'm too busy making history. You want to be my future? Wait until I retire." And then there was the time he lectured a group of young fighters who were bragging about their conquests. Ali shook his head and said, "You all talk about knocking women out. I talk about knocking men out. That's why I'm the champ." But perhaps the funniest story was when a reporter asked him, "Ali, what's your secret to staying away from women?" Ali looked at him, grinned, and said, "It's easy. I run faster than they do." But it wasn't always laughs and discipline. Ali was human. His marriages were a roller coaster, and he wasn't always faithful. He struggled with the same temptations he warned others about. His wives would tell stories of his charm, his unpredictability, and his constant battle between being the devoted husband and the global superstar. One of his wives once said, "Being married to Ali is like being married to the moon. He's always there, but he's always somewhere else." But what makes Ali's story powerful is his honesty. He didn't pretend to be perfect. He admitted his struggles, his mistakes, and his regrets. He was a champion in the ring, but outside, he was just another man trying to do his best. Ali wasn't the only fighter who struggled with the temptations of women and the lifestyle that came with fame. Many boxers throughout history have faced the same battle. The difference is, Ali didn't just fight his opponents. He fought his own desires with the same determination. Take the legendary Sugar Ray Robinson, for example. Known as one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters ever, Robinson was not just famous for his stunning combinations in the ring, but also for his lavish lifestyle. Robinson had an entourage of friends, jazz musicians, and yes, plenty of women. His desire to enjoy the good life sometimes clashed with his training regimen. There are stories of Robinson partying the night before a fight and still stepping into the ring the next day, relying on sheer talent to see him through. But even Robinson acknowledged that the lifestyle took a toll. Years later, he admitted that his indulgences sometimes made fights harder than they needed to be. And then there was Jack Dempsey, the Manasseh Mauler. Dempsey's rise to fame in the 1920s brought with it plenty of female attention. Dempsey was known for his rugged, good looks and brute strength, making him a magnet for admirers. After becoming heavyweight champion, he found himself swarmed by women, even while preparing for fights. Dempsey later reflected on how managing fame and distractions was just as tough as facing his toughest opponents. In his autobiography, he wrote about how he had to isolate himself before big bouts, understanding that while women were drawn to his success, the attention could be his downfall if he let it consume him. But perhaps the most similar story to Ali's was that of Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber. Louis, a heavyweight champion revered for his power and technique, also struggled with his own temptations. Louis grew up modestly and became an icon not only for his boxing skills, but for his humility. However, success brought temptation. During his reign, Lewis's relationships and affairs often became public, leading to scrutiny. His trainer, Jack Blackburn, was known to tell him, "If you want to keep that title, you need to keep your feet on the ground and out of trouble." Lewis's discipline wavered at times, but when it came to training, he usually pulled himself together, driven by a sense of responsibility and pride in representing his community. Ali knew about these fighters and their struggles. Growing up, he studied not just their fighting styles, but also their lives. He knew that even legends could fall if they didn't control their desires. Ali didn't want to be remembered as a great fighter who lost his edge because of distractions. That's why he often joked about being too pretty to get involved. But behind the humor was a serious message. Success requires sacrifice. One of Ali's most notable approaches to dealing with temptation was to keep himself busy. He trained relentlessly, even when there wasn't a fight scheduled. His famous roadwork sessions, where he ran and shadowboxed while bantering with those around him, were a way to channel his energy. When he wasn't training, Ali occupied his mind with spiritual reflection, community work, and promoting his next big bout. He made sure that his schedule was so packed that there wasn't much room for trouble. But no one is perfect. Even Ali, despite his resolve, wasn't immune to slipping up. His personal life became complicated, with multiple marriages and affairs. But unlike some fighters who fell apart completely, Ali had an uncanny ability to compartmentalize. When it was time to train, he would lock himself away from the world, cutting off distractions as if flipping a switch. One of his trainers, Angelo Dundee, once remarked that when Ali was focused, nothing could break his concentration. It was as if he put his personal life on hold to become a fighter in the purest sense. Other fighters weren't so fortunate. Take Mike Tyson, for example, who openly admitted that his lack of discipline outside the ring cost him dearly. Tyson's raw talent and power were undeniable, but his lifestyle choices led to legal troubles and financial ruin. Reflecting on his career, Tyson often spoke about how he envied fighters like Ali, who managed to balance fame with discipline, even if imperfectly. Tyson's struggle was a cautionary tale that Ali learned from, choosing to keep his most important battles in the ring rather than outside it. Another example is Floyd Patterson, a former heavyweight champion who faced criticism for being too gentle and soft-spoken compared to his peers. Patterson was a deeply introspective person, and while he didn't indulge in the wild lifestyle of some champions, he often struggled with his self-worth. For Patterson, his distractions came not from women, but from doubt. Ali respected Patterson, but saw him as an example of how a fighter must also be mentally resilient. To Ali, resisting temptation wasn't just about avoiding women. It was about staying confident, focused, and strong mentally. As Ali matured, he became more vocal about his struggles with temptation. He would often speak to younger fighters, warning them about the pitfalls of fame. He shared his own stories, sometimes with humor, but always with a lesson. Ali wanted them to understand that discipline was more than just physical training. It was about mental control and making the right choices. By the time he faced George Foreman in the famous Rumble in the Jungle, Ali had learned how to balance his charisma with discipline. He knew he couldn't afford distractions. In Zaire, where the fight took place, Ali isolated himself again, focusing solely on the monumental task ahead. And it paid off. Foreman, a powerhouse, was outsmarted and outlasted by a man who had mastered not just boxing, but also his own impulses. Ali's story is not just about overcoming opponents in the ring. It's about conquering oneself. He didn't always succeed, and he wasn't flawless, but his determination to keep fighting, both in the ring and in life, made him the icon he is. Unlike some of his contemporaries who couldn't balance success and personal life, Ali faced his flaws head-on. In the end, Ali's story serves as both inspiration and caution. While his battles with women, fame, and desire were just as intense as his fights with Foreman, Frazier, or Liston, they shaped the man behind the gloves. Ali didn't just teach the world how to throw a punch or deliver a rhyme. He taught us that greatness comes not from being perfect, but from always striving to overcome. And so, when we remember Ali, we see the fighter who could dodge punches, deliver verbal jabs, and captivate audiences worldwide. But we should also remember the man who knew that the real battle wasn't always in the ring. Sometimes, it was within.